From Nairobi, Kenya, you're listening to the Kuza Podcast, brought to you by kuza.com.
Welcome to Kuza Podcast once again. Thank you so much for tuning in and all the ways that you have engaged with the content that we've been throwing your way. Thank you so much for the comments, the thoughts, and we continue to pray and trust that these things are building your soul. As usual, we continue on with our conversations. I don't know how much of the conversations you tracked, but today we have a good conversation trying to just maneuver through the realities of the book of Lamentation, pretty much painting a background of, the hard times that people go through. If you look at our country right now, wherever you're listening from, I'm sure there are different things that you can point out in that country or that particular place as well. But here in Kenya, there's been a lot of things going on. People are going through difficult times, a tough economy, especially for young people, things are tough. You're finishing high, even if it's high school, getting university, sometimes it's a trouble. You're trying to look for a job or you're trying to get this next promotion. Life is just throwing people in different directions and things can seem quite hard. The darkness that seems to engulf most of us from whatever direction, financial, emotional, many things are happening. And sometimes one of the things that we need to, we wonder about mostly is, is there even hope for tomorrow? We usually say there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel. And sometimes you're wondering, this doesn't just seem to be a tunnel with an end. And so at that point, you are asking, is there hope really in this life when things are so tough, thick, and there's just strain everywhere? So that's what we want to explore today in our conversation. So track with us as we answer the question: when hope feels lost, what do we do? What happens to us? How do we engage in that? And if you're in that situation or somebody is there, well, I hope that this conversation is going to be meaningful both for your mind and for your soul. And to help me just wrap up and just try and thin out this conversation, we have Justus. Chungaji, thank you so much for being with us, and Edgar. Asante sana kuwa nasi, and I see you all have very nice new
Sure, we bless God.
You people have found hope.
It's part of His provision.
Somehow, right? Asante sana. Thank you so much for being with us today. And when hope feels lost, I think before we just get into the nitty-gritties of it, don't explain too much. Don't give any details. Don't be colorful with the answer. But in a short response, has this been a reality for you? Have you come to that place at some point you're just thinking, man, this tunnel, it either just collapses on me so that I don't have to continue the journey, or it just seems too long, it's not ending?
Several right. moments in my life. Mm-hmm. I think I've found myself in those moments.
Right.
Yeah, where you wonder, is there really, like you're putting it, light at the end of the tunnel?
Yes.
So I've experienced that for sure. And you are left alone crying and praying and asking God questions. I remember a time I could tell God, you just tell me what you want with me and I'm ready to do it.
Right.
Why do you have to allow me to go through all this?
Right.
Just to pass maybe a simple message to me, So,
right.
And that frustration.
Interesting.
Yes.
A simple message might be quite, might mean different things for many people. A simple message can be very tough. Edgar, is there a time?
Yeah. There have been times a while back where that has felt the weight of just the heaviness of not even just affliction, but just life in general seems to weigh you down. You ask, as I said, you ask questions, you wonder, why did I exist this way? Why have I been made this way? But thankful to the Lord that He pulls us out of it, as we shall seek to show in this podcast.
Right. Very simple. Yes or no response. So do these moments happen to serious Christians, or whatever serious Christian means?
They do. Yeah.
You okay, Edgar?
Yes, they do.
This is for those of us who are weak in faith.
No.
We don't trust enough for God to.
This is for it's. Everyone will go through this. Even the people we'll be looking at.
Exactly.
Have gone through.
They have gone through it. In fact, and that's why you just want to direct your attention. If you are seated somewhere and you can scroll through as you listen, if you have a different phone or you have your Bible somewhere, we actually want to look at the life of this interesting man, the prophet himself, who wrote the book of Lamentations, one Jeremiah guy. And I pray that, this conversation is going to help us just to come to the place where we realize that sometimes, yes, we come to a place when hope feels lost. And maybe you guys can just add in on why it feels lost, or is just hope feels lost, or is hope actually lost at some point? But let me start with the Edgar. The the reality. What's the background of these conversations, the Book of Lamentations, and how can we put it in our day to day to seek an understanding? Because the book itself, if somebody has not read the book, then you need to read it, because the prophet brings several things. So as you do that, maybe you also help us to understand how can we stay honest about that feeling of, things are just bad and maybe God is not there. I don't know, maybe you can just kick us off in that direction.
So as you say, Jeremiah is the man who coined the Lamentations, and as the word itself denotes or shows, Lamentations is in essence Jeremiah lamenting to the Lord, making a cry to the Lord of anguish. He's filled with anguish. He's filled with darkness in him, and that because of this, he's lamenting to the Lord. He's a man, as you've said, who went through a lot. If you even just read before the Book of Lamentations, we have the Book of Jeremiah. If you just even read before that, you'll just get to see the man went through a lot through the hands of his own people. But here he is going beyond that and showing even to the people, why are they going through what they are going through? That's why Lamentations 1, for example, is showing that the reason the people of Israel are going through the afflictions they are, the enemies are defeating them, is because they brought it on themselves through their sin. It even says this in Lamentations 1:8. Jerusalem sinned grievously, therefore she became filthy. And then verse 18 of the same chapter, the Lord is in the right, for I have rebelled against his word. So it's not something that the people of Israel are just going through because. But if anything, what this chapter shows, before I even go further, is that suffering, we usually look at afflictions or suffering as the means by which unbelief comes. But if you read the Lamentations 1, you'll get to see that suffering doesn't, it's a statement a brother, one of my pastors made once, suffering doesn't cause unbelief, it reveals it. And we see that even in verse 19, because the people suffer. What do the people do? They call to their lovers. They do not turn to the Lord. They call to their lovers, and then their lovers deceive them. So we see suffering is not the cause of unbelief. It just reveals it. And then chapter 2, it's now the Lord dealing out the consequences of their sin. We see his wrath in full measure against the people of Israel, and showing how it's because of that sin that they are being punished. But then in chapter 3, which is where we'll spend the bulk of our time, we now get to see that the only way the Lord will make us right with himself is not through us. It's not of what we've done. It's through himself, through his faithfulness, that the Lord will do the right thing because of his faithfulness. We have done nothing to deserve it. And even verses 1 to 20 will show that everything about us should not deserve it. But the Lord has been gracious to reveal it to us.
And that's quite interesting. I think maybe just a follow-up question, and then just want you to get ready to respond to one of our questions here. When you read the text in Lamentation, it talks about, though we feel like the chosen ones, Israel is the chosen one, they have become the forsaken ones. There's that kind of reality. Like, they feel like, we are the chosen people, but right now we are honestly not feeling the chosen part is not there. We're actually feeling like the forsaken ones. And so, how do you suggest that we can, people should process the gap without becoming cynical toward God when I'm born again, I'm the chosen one of God, but then right now, God seemingly is not there with all the promises we get in church. You go to church and the promise is always positive. This is where that is the only place you're not. So how do you bridge the gap?
The thing is, as I've said, we cannot run away from affliction. We can try, but we won't be able to. And so there'll be a point. And the reason for that, first and foremost, is because of where we are. We are on this side of eternity. We are on the side of eternity that's still plagued by sin. We are on the side of eternity that's still plagued by the wickedness of the human heart. That our hearts are deceitful. They will, even if they are changed, even if we are transformed and made Christians, the reality is we'll still be at war daily within us. We'll be at war daily within us. And so while we are on this side of eternity trying to, yes, we may feel down because of afflictions, but the reality is we are in a reality in which is plagued by sin, cast by the fall, and the only way to make it right, as we shall show, is through the faithfulness of God that will lead us to Him eternally.
Interesting. Just as maybe as you maybe just add something on that, how to make sense of all these positive promises in the congregation and the reality that I'm going through. Probably things are difficult, as you just add on to what Edgar said. So we know the chapter 3 does not just end on that grumbling note, because at some point, in verse, I think 20, I don't know, verse, is it 21, 22, around there. So, but this I call to mind, there's a shift. And so maybe as you just adding on that, if you have anything to add on that, but also just help us to understand then that there's a point of joy, but is there really a point of joy, and how long does it take sometimes? Because sometimes our physical reality is still tears and rubbles, and we are hoping in a God that is apparently mighty.
Yeah. Thank you for that. One, it is good to appreciate that, yes, at times there comes those moments that we said, even for those people who have been in salvation for long, they have grown, we always at times get to that place, and you feel like you're forsaken, and sometimes you wonder, have I sinned against God? Why am I going through what I'm going through? Why is it that I thought I have been called by God, I have been chosen, and we have many even servants of God who go through rough moments, and you start questioning even your call, and you start questioning, God's salvation even upon your life, and so those moments are there. But the beautiful thing is looking at the reality of the Bible. It does not paint a picture of a Christian or someone who knows God and all is smooth in their lives. It throughout from Genesis all the way to Revelation, we see people who loved God so much, and yet they had their own share of troubles, while we are on this other side of heaven. But then looking at the book of Lamentation, chapter 3, you see there is a twist. There is a change that happens in Lamentation chapter 3. And this is especially when the prophet opens his own eyes to another realization that with God, it is not all tears. It's not all difficult times. It's not all, it's not all struggles that we are going through. And this is what he talks about, that this he recalls in his mind. And therefore he has hope that it's because of God's mercy that we are not consumed, that his steadfast love, it's there forever with us. And therefore what happens is that at times situations might not change, circumstances might remain the same, but our perspective when it comes to the realization of who God is, when we come to the realization of his steadfast love upon our lives, that change of perspective, even without change of circumstance, that gives us a lot of hope in our situation. And that is what we see with the prophet of the Lord, that yes, he had complained about the heavy hand of the Lord upon the nation, yet there was more to consider, of course, about God, that he remembers how God had dealt with the Israelites back during their days of Pharaoh, and even the Red Sea, how God parts the Red Sea, the wilderness and the miracles, the conquest of the land, of course, of the promise, the kings and the judges. And looking at all this and seeing how God worked through his people, this gives him a perspective And that is important, of course, in our walk with God, that in those difficult moments, as we get to have, because we have the benefit of just having some retrospection, looking back into the scriptures and looking at how God has dealt with his people. My challenge to even to my listeners is like, when you get to see how God has worked over the years, what is your response? Is your response one of joyful exaltation, or is it one that you continue sinking in your lament? And therefore, when you remember of God's steadfast love, when you grow in terms of the knowledge of God, in terms of looking at his love and mercy for us, John 3:16, in terms of getting to appreciate that we serve an all-sufficient and a God who is enough. He is able to do exceedingly, beyond what we think or imagine. When we get this perspective of God, it ought to change how we perceive even the difficult times. And therefore, my call to my listener is to really, really look at life from God's perspective. And out of looking at life from God's viewpoint, that has the ability to bring hope, even in this situation that feels as though hope is lost.
Right.
Yeah.
So pretty much on a perspective shift where we start being intentional on looking at the character of God. I think there's the whole thing about maybe the challenge to not be focused so much on God as the problem solver, and the way the Bible says the Lord is my portion. So then whether things change immediately or not, I still know I have a God at hand. Anyway, thank you so much for that. I'm going to come back to you guys in a short while. For those of us who are tuning in from wherever you're tuning in, hopefully this conversation is getting somewhere for you. Are you going through those difficult moments when you feel like hope is completely lost? Well, the question is your hope in the fact that things will change, or your hope is in the unchanging God? I think those are two things that you want to keep in mind even as we are getting the challenge to change our perspectives. Talking about changing our perspectives, you want to check out kuzaapp.com, and there are many things there that will help you to learn or to grow towards changing perspective. A lot of content that you will find there, blogs, podcasts to listen to, and other audios and videos that can help you to grow in your relationship with the Lord. So make sure that you do that. If you've not downloaded the app yet, kindly do that. If you have a smartphone, make sure you go to your Play Store or your Apple Store and download the Kuza app, and you'll get information that is going to help you. This is a good thing. You can also share with a friend or two. Top right corner of the website with a button there, Receive Christ button. That's going to help you to probably understand the message of the gospel if you've not understood it before, or you've been having a challenge to share the gospel with somebody and you're thinking, I just need something that I can send to them and they can understand the message of the gospel. Then that's your place to go. Top right corner of the website, there's a Receive Christ button, and there's a good video right there that is going to help you to continue to just understand what the gospel is. Any questions, comments, thoughts, suggestions, kindly make sure that you send your messages right there down on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and any other link that you think about. You will find us right there waiting to minister to you. So let's continue tracking for the next few minutes remaining so that we continue to build this conversation. So far, we have agreed, yes, the problems come. We all get that place where you feel like God is. In fact, I think Jeremiah says, feel like God is like a lion lying in wait. He's just like waiting to just deal with me. But we're also being reminded by Justo that, there's a change of perspective that we must have, where we shift and we see that indeed God is up to something good eventually. We may not see it immediately, but that God is always up to something good. Edgar, so if God does restore hope, how do we press then the reboot button, as it were, from the tension of the struggle to the newness of the hope that we have, seeing that we are being told, there's joyful exultation, just reminding us, but this I call to mind, so how do we move then from this place to the next place in a practical sense, and how does that spiritual reboot or revamping look like for someone who feels like they have lost years in maybe depression, they have lost years in joblessness, they have lost years in a lot of bad decisions, external failures? How does it look like?
Yeah. To even go back to Lamentations, as we've been looking at, you've acknowledged already that we are the ones the reason these problems exist, the reason these afflictions exist, are mainly because of the side of eternity we are in. And so sometimes it feels, as we've said, you can be bogged down by this. You can think like Jeremiah, as Marvin has pointed out in verse 10 to 12, saying that he's a bear. This is chapter 3. He's a bear lying in wait for me, a lion in hiding. He turned aside my steps and tore me to pieces. He has made me desolate. He bent his bow and set me as a target for his arrow. You can feel that. And in a sense, it's true. But the question is, are you now looking as a Christian? Because the reality is, as a Christian, are you now looking to the fact that the same God who, in a sense, allowed your affliction to happen is the same God who, as just as I showed, will easily get you out of it. Right. That he's the same God who sent his son to die on the cross for you. He's the same God who ensured that his son rose from the dead as our justification. That the reason we have any hope is not because of us, it's because of him through his son making it possible, that we can press on for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus, because the Lord has made it possible. So the question for us, we are to be a people who, even Peter makes this point clearly in his letter, First Peter. He asks, "What are you suffering for? Are you suffering for the Lord, or are you suffering for the things in the world?" Whether it's because the examples used there is that you've committed a crime or something, or your wealth or your money or your job. Are you suffering for the Lord or for the world? If you are suffering for the Lord, the reality is you can suffer well. The point Peter was trying to make to them, you can suffer well. Why? Because you have this joy in you that cannot be extinguished by man or even by yourself. No matter what you try to do, you cannot extinguish that joy. So for you, what you have to do is to trust and rely on the Lord who saves. Trust and rely on the Lord who will restore me fully and completely to himself.
Maybe a quick one, and just to respond to that, and maybe in like a very short time. There is the reality of many of us think that we know, and the Bible says, new beginnings or new masses always means something positive. But also the reality that sometimes the new masses will probably usher us into a more intense situation. It might not necessarily be positive, or how do we prepare our hearts for the fact that restoration might actually require us to face new difficult trials and that we've never encountered before. So then because it almost looks like a contradiction for some people.
So I know afflictions for many can look grievous. Many people can see there's a hopelessness to it, but the reality is there are times, as Marvin is saying, affliction is for our good. Something that's even come to mind is there is a prayer I remember reading a while back where the prayer is in essence this. He was using the journey of the Israelites, the exodus from Egypt to Canaan. And the reality was this, that when the Israelites used to, at many times, look to Egypt. They were like, we had this in Egypt. We had the good things in Egypt. We could eat. We could sleep. We were not roaming around. But here we are in the wilderness with nothing, and we've seen the Canaanites are immense giants. So what can we do against them? And so the prayer for him was, Lord, instead, when I look to Egypt, forcefully take me to Canaan. And so, in a sense, in our affliction, we need to look at that because we still have sinful hearts. And the reality is, the Lord might be using more trials, not to make us feel hopeless, but to fully push us to himself, to fully restore us to himself. And so that should be our posture, that Lord, reveal your will to me through my afflictions, that I may glorify you all the more.
Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Or are we just here telling nice narratives?
Yeah, there is light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah. One of the encouragement that I've always had in my own personal life is that the Christian story always ends with victory. Regardless of what people of God went through in the scriptures, we always have a beautiful ending, and we hear their stories, of course, end with victory. Even in situations that looked so hopeless. And even for us, in Revelation 21, we are able to see that still our story will still end up in great victory. And with Christ, one thing that we know is that God is not distant. He's not detached from the situation that you are going through. And the Bible tells us in Romans chapter 8, verse 38, to 39, that for I am persuaded, and I like that persuasion for Paul, that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus, our Lord. And therefore, whatever situation that you are going through, I pray that the similar persuasion shall be also in your life, that, you can confess and say like Paul, that nothing, all those moments will be there, but you remain steadfast, because, Christ's love for you is steadfast. It does not change. He loves you and he cares about your life. And therefore, he does not, every new day, of course, is a reminder that God is still at work. God is still present. He's still working in our lives. He's doing a lot behind the scenes. You may not see it clearly, for sure, because in the moment when you're going through lots of situations, it's sometimes too, even before the morning, before the dawn comes, it's usually really dark, and at times you may wonder, does God care? Does this situation has an end to it? But I want to encourage my listener that there is indeed hope, that there is God who is at work. There is a God who has walked with his people in the past, and we can trust him even with our situations today, that he will be able to see us through to the end. So, Pastor Mavo, there is hope.
There is hope. Yeah. There is hope at the end of the tunnel. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you for just tracking through. There's a lot more we can say about these things, but we need to land the plane. And the question for you is, are you at that place when you're feeling like hope is all lost? Well, we have just been reminded, yes, there is hope at the end of the tunnel. I think the only thing that we'll need to continue keeping our trust on is to trust the Lord that the tunnel is not probably as long as you think it is. And even if it is, that he is there as our portion. He's there with us. And that's what the Bible reminds us, that, so I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you are there with me. Those are difficult things sometimes for us to chew. It's good to say them when you're having a nice time, but when we are in the thick of it, these are difficult conversations. However, we have an unchanging God, and his character and nature are never swayed by any of our circumstances. Thank you so much, Edgar and Justus, for the conversations for today. If you're there and you still need some of these conversations going on, kindly send a message and reach out, and we'll try to help as much as we can. KuzaApp.com is where you need to visit. Until next time, continue tuning in and share the vibes across. Till later.
Thank you for listening to the Kuza podcast. Brought to you by KuzaApp.com, an online ministry with blogs, videos, podcasts, and a mobile app. Make sure to subscribe to get more content to help you grow spiritually.